What is going on, guys? My name is Wheelman, and Battlefield 4. I think I'll call this video Battlefield 4 in Focus. I wanted to give my opinion on some of the things that are going on in Battlefield 4 right now, not anything to do with the netcode. I want to make that clear. This is not going to be a video in which I rant or even discuss any of the current issues that plague Battlefield 4 or have plagued Battlefield 4 as of the making of this video from the release until now. That is a video, and while I think those are important topics, that's a video that's already been made many times by many different YouTubers at this point, and it's all I could do would be to rehash things that have already been said. And I know DICE is working on the game and doing what they can. I have my own opinions about the state of the game and the release dates and DICE and EA, but I guarantee you there are things you've heard before if you've been paying attention to the Battlefield YouTube commentator scene in the last 2 or 3 months. So I'm not going to go over all that stuff. What I am going to go over are some things in the game that I have some ideas about in terms of switching things around and how I might like to personally have the game be played or see the balancing. And again, this is not necessarily a criticism or a critique, just some hypothetical ideas I have for BF4 and how I think it could be really fun, even more fun than it is right now. So first off, my opinions on the Engineer, Carbine, and SMG switch around, or PDWs, excuse me. I play, as I've said before, in Battlefield games, I play almost exclusively Engineer. I really enjoy the Engineer class, and I do play the other classes sometimes, but I spend most of my time, the vast majority of my time, playing Engineer because I find it the most fun and the most practical, the most useful, given the game modes that I enjoy playing. And in Battlefield 3, I think the decision to give the Engineers Carbines was a good one. I think that balanced it pretty fairly, given the disadvantages that someone wielding a carbine often had against an assault player with an assault rifle. Now that said, in Battlefield 4, an Engineer, and an assault also for that matter, can still have a carbine. However, I don't necessarily agree with DICE's decision to set the Engineer weapons by default to PDWs. Now, what I will say to the credit of that decision and to DICE's credit is that I think I can understand some of their intention in making that decision, which is to get the Engineer class, or at least have some of the soldiers on the battlefield, sort of forcing them to funnel in and charge at the enemy and get right in their close quarters where the PDWs show their strengths, and tear the enemy apart from the inside out, which is something that I like to do just purely because I'm ADD as hell and I enjoy running and gunning a lot. I can't sit still, so I will charge in just completely without consideration for my own life and run into a group of enemies because that's the playstyle that I find fun. It's not the most effective necessarily all of the time. Sometimes I get lucky, but it's what I have fun doing and I thoroughly enjoy it. So if that was the idea, and I have a sense that at least in part that it was, then I agree with that decision. However, I use a carbine as an Engineer. I feel that while I do really enjoy specialization of the different classes and the weapon balancing aspects of those specializations and things like that, I choose to use a carbine because it gives me that edge, that's just a little bit of edge in terms of ranged engagements. So for instance, if I were using a PDW, there are certain parts on almost every map, with maybe the exception of Operation Locker, which there really is no reason to be playing Engineer on Operation Locker anyway. But on every other map, there are situations, and many of them, that are medium-range engagements, where I'm going to need a carbine, because if I were using a PDW, I would get shot. I would have to duck behind cover or get shot because of the lack of range and damage at range that the PDWs offer. So while I think that wasn't the worst idea, and I'm very glad that carbines are still available to those of us who choose to play the Engineer class, I don't know if I agree with the design decision to switch them in terms of which is the default. But again, the carbines are still available, so it's not something that I'm necessarily going to complain about, just a thought. Additionally, I think there are some ways in which possibly the next Battlefield game, or even Battlefield 4, had it been given some more time in development, could have used some change-ups that haven't ever been included in a Battlefield game as far as I'm aware. For example, I find it sort of odd that a support player carrying a light machine gun, belts and belts of ammo, packs of ammunition, entire packs of ammunition, C4, all of these gadgets and these very heavy things can run and be as agile as an assault player with nothing but an assault rifle and a sidearm and maybe a medical kit, or an Engineer player being as fast as a sniper, whereas the Engineer has to carry a rocket launcher on their back, but also has the advantage of having a lighter weapon, whether that's a carbine or a PDW. For that reason, I think different running speeds or carry weights would be an interesting feature to see implemented into a Battlefield game. For example, having a support player be more heavy or clunky to play with so that it encourages a playstyle that suits a support role. And that's just one example, but much in the same way that aim down sights times vary by which class you're playing. So aiming down the sight on an assault rifle or a carbine is different than aiming down the sight on a light machine gun. I would also be interested in seeing how the classes play out and how battles play out if the medic class were separate from the assault class. Now, I don't know what would be done with the assault class in that situation, but I've heard the opinion expressed by several people that the assault class having the ability both to resurrect people and to heal, as well as being the most effective class on the battlefield at taking people down at pretty much all ranges with the exception of extreme long range, is kind of overpowered. And it's not, I don't know whether I agree or disagree with that or have any opinion on it at all. And I know that the medic class was separate in Battlefield Bad Company 2, which I didn't really play at all. But I'd be interested in seeing how that would work out if it were implemented in a modern Battlefield game. Just some ideas for balancing classes out, and I think that'd be an interesting thing to see, and it would sort of really divide players up into the different roles, from active players, running gunners, to guys who want to lock down, a hallway near an objective, near an MCOM or something like that with a support kit, or even snipers, or whatever it is, whatever class it is that you personally enjoy playing in Battlefield. Finally, the last idea I have for today to do with Battlefield 4 and the Battlefield series in general is the idea that perhaps Battlefield should only be a multiplayer series. And I'm interested in your feedback on this particular aspect with regard to whether or not you actually play and or enjoy the Battlefield campaigns, whether it's Battlefield 3 or 4 or Bad Company or whatever it is that you're into. Are the campaigns something that you really pay attention to and have fun and put time into playing? Because in Battlefield 4, there are several weapons which can only be unlocked by playing through the campaign multiple times and getting certain, not achievements, but milestones in the campaign, in-game achievements, if you will. And I think that's kind of evidence of DICE really trying to push the campaign element of the game on players who, as far as I can see, at least within the YouTube community, are not terribly interested in it. And I think it's generally known, or generally felt, there's consensus that the Battlefield campaigns are not the most creative story-wise. They are, gameplay-wise, decently fun to play, but really they kind of drag on, and this is partially my personal opinion, of course, but Battlefield 3 campaign was dreadful to me, and the Battlefield 4 campaign wasn't a whole lot better. So my idea is that, and this can be applied to any game with, specifically first-person shooters work well with this, but any game with a campaign and co-op and competitive multiplayer mode all wrapped up into one, or any combination of those things, is that I think they can be sold in a modular way or a compartmental way. So for instance, say you're someone like myself who's only interested really in the Battlefield 4 multiplayer element, whether you're really competitive or you're a casual player or anywhere in between. You don't care much for the story and don't see yourself utilizing the co-op mode too much, so you really just want to play multiplayer. I think it would be a good idea, perhaps, especially with the more recent advent and popularity of digital downloads for games, and for PC gamers especially, although the next-gen consoles are now coming into that. It would be a good idea, in my opinion, to sell perhaps the multiplayer for, say, $30 or $40. And if you wanted to buy the campaign, that could be $10 or $20. And if you wanted to buy the co-op, that could be maybe $10, $15. So that you could pay only for what parts of the game you're going to actually use, rather than just wasting your money on the parts of the game that you don't see yourself playing. And this, again, can be applied not just to Battlefield, but to really any first-person shooter that has all of these different elements, or any game, really. So I think that's just an interesting idea. Let me know what you think about that. And that's about all I have for you today on Battlefield and Battlefield 4. If you have any opinions, leave them in the comments. I would love to see them. I'm always going through the comment section and responding to all that I can. If you like the video, feel free to give it a like. If you dislike it, feel free to give it a dislike. And other than that, I would like to thank you for watching, and have an awesome day.